When it comes to Allen Iverson in his own era and even now, one of the most polarizing figures of all time. And if you ask NBA fans, would Allen Iverson in 2024 be a great player? The answers you get would surprise you. And looking at ESPN, Jabba the Hutt Brian Windhorst, a devout Clutch Sports member, he argues Allen Iverson in today's league wouldn't be nearly as good.
But if we're going to talk about how things are different today, we have to talk about both sides of it, which is why he wouldn't average 43. Because number one, they wouldn't let him play over 40 minutes a game, Stephen A. You know that. They'd have him down 35, 36 minutes. Secondly, he wouldn't be allowed to take 27 shots if he was shooting 41, 42%. I know what you're saying about the hand checking, but he was a volume scorer, and in today's day and age, volume scoring is out. Nobody wants a volume scorer. If you're a volume scorer,
but he would have
criticized.
Now, to be fair to Brian Windhorst, saying Allen Iverson would average 43 points per game, a tad bit extreme. But the overall point remains. When it comes to Windhorst versus Iverson, he thinks AI in the current NBA wouldn't be nearly as good. And some of the main points Windhorst made is that AI in the current NBA, he, quote, wouldn't play 40 minutes per game, wouldn't take 27 shots, and wouldn't be allowed to be a volume scorer. Because, quote, volume scoring is out in today's league. So, addressing that first claim, that Iverson playing 40 minutes per game, that wouldn't be allowed. To a certain extent, he is right. But even looking at someone like James Harden just 5 years ago, playing 38, 39, even 40 minutes per game on a nightly basis. And for Iverson back in the day, why he was playing 42 minutes per game every single season was with his teams and his lack of help. And even looking at the 0-1 Sixers, his best team in Philly, with him off the court offensively, they plummeted across the board, as their offensive rating with Iverson on the court was 106.2. In the entire NBA, that ranked 8th. With Iverson off the floor, it dropped to 97.3, which ranked second to last in that year's NBA. Now looking at Brian's second point, saying in the current NBA, the late 2010s, early 2020s, that volume scorers nowadays are, quote, out of the NBA. I just do not buy that at all. Recent history, a James Harden, a Luka, Joel Embiid, Dame, Trae Young, Steph Curry. You can go on and on and on with high volume scorers that are score first players. And if you want to talk team offensive game plans, Dallas in the early 2020s, the Hawks, Portland, those teams on a nightly basis ran their offense through one player exclusively. Does being so ball dominant, so ISO-centric, equate to immense success? Well, not necessarily. But the point remains, ISO-heavy players, score-first players, are so prevalent in the 2020s era. And Windhorst's main knock on Iverson is that he, quote, was shooting 41% and inefficient. Now, just looking at raw stats, raw numbers, 41% not great for the current NBA. But here's the thing, the current NBA isn't the early 2000s. And first off, looking at teammate help offensively, 4 times in his career, had 20 points per game teammate. 1997 had Jerry Stackhouse, 06 Chris Webber, and for 2 years had Melo. Now, that first year 97, his rookie season, kind of the outlier, we're looking at Iverson with great teammate help. But those other 3 years, 06, 07, and 08, his shooting percentage, 44% to 45%, pretty damn good. Now here's the question you have to ask. Was that peak Iverson the best version of Iverson? Of course not. But in terms of teammate offensive help, having a competent offensive teammate, that was the best he ever got. And immediately, 45% just like that. And the bigger issue at hand, looking past teammate help on the offensive end, is the defensive era Iverson played in. And unfortunately for Iverson, that tough defensive era overlapped with his teams not being great offensively outside of him. As looking at a 6-year stretch, 05 to 99, out of those 6 years, 5 of the years were the lowest scoring years in modern NBA history. And again, to hammer it home, Iverson in that period had not one teammate averaging 20 points per game beside him. And if you sit down and watch prime Iverson, watch the defense he played against, some of those playoff series, the defense entirely, all 5 guys, keyed in on Iverson, watching him, reacting to his plays, and what he does. And a lot of times with the defense, they were so focused on Iverson. Backdoor cuts, easy lobs were available for his teammates at the basket. And anytime Iverson drove to the rim, 3, 4, even 5 guys collapse on him all at once. And one of the big time differences from this era and our current era, in today's league, get past your player, you're at the rim for an easy 2. Back then, get past your man, got one more guy to beat, and at the rim, a very tough finish for shot blocking bigs.
True, but he also got to the foul line a lot. I know they didn't call everything, but a big part of this game was getting to the foul line. He did benefit from that. The other thing I'll say is, at the other end of the court, they would target him like crazy in switches that he got away with back then when he had a defensive-based team and the game was played differently and they could protect him. They could protect him also because of the way they could play defense. He would be an absolute dead red target on defense, which would be hard to have him out there.
So, stopping right there, Windhorst, kind of sneaky and slick with the tactics when debating Iverson. As looking at Iverson's defense versus offense, the context he adds is very, very different. On the offensive end, it's pretty plain and simple. While Iverson shot 41%, he was inefficient and a shot chucker. But on defense, to downplay Iverson brings up his team being a great defensive team. Now, Brian, you're going to be consistent. That same defensive team, look at them on offense. Completely abysmal. I'm not going to lie to you guys, overrate Iverson, say he was some great defender, lockdown perimeter guy, because he wasn't. But in terms of the current NBA versus Allen Iverson, there's a lot of volume scorers today who play little or no defense. And I think it's pretty obvious to everyone, being a bad defensive player today doesn't really mean much. As scorers nowadays, 120, 125, even 140 points on a nightly basis. And still those teams can win, compete, and be top 5 seeds. And just off the dome, guys like Kyrie, Steph, James Harden, a Ja, a Luka, Trae Young, all those guys, high volume score first guards, who on defense, average, below average, some of those guys downright horrible. And still, they thrive in this era.
Okay, we're talking about a guy that led his team to the NBA Finals when it was boxes and elbows, when it was a level of physicality that was unmatched. Do you know what
I know, and he shot 31% on threes.
So what? But that's the problem. That has nothing. We keep diving into these analytics. We keep diving into these field goal percentages. We keep diving into these cameras on the floor and what guys are saying. No, he could hoop. The eye tests tell me that Allen Iverson would have gave people that work in today's game.
Now look, Kendrick Perkins is not the best debater by any means, but in this instance, he is correct despite being kind of dumb. When looking at someone like Iverson, a guy who was lightning quick, had an amazing first step, crazy bounce, was durable. In today's league, he would thrive. And unlike a lot of guards in today's NBA, who kind of are soft and I would say foul bait, Iverson back in the day took legit fouls and loved contact. Am I saying every player from back in the day in this era would thrive, be great, even be better? No, I'm not. But looking at Iverson, his specific skill set, his build, for today's league, he's perfect. And unfortunately for Iverson, the era he played in terms of spacing, defensive rules, and of course teammate help, all that stuff was stacked against him. The only time Iverson really had a bona fide superstar teammate for in a single season was 08 with Melo. Now Iverson at this point, at the edge of his prime, about to step out of it. And still, shooting-wise, had his best year of his career. From the field, 46%, second best of his career. From 3, 35%, the best. And on 2s, 48%, again, second. And looking at that Denver team, it wasn't just Melo. Offensively, spacing-wise, guys like Kleza, Anthony Carter, and of course, J.R. Smith. And Denver that year, they were top 10 threes taken and 6th in true shooting percentage. Out of Iverson's entire career, that Denver team in terms of spacing, offensive help, the best he ever had. And efficiency-wise, no coincidence, the best year of his career despite not being the best version of Iverson. So, as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.